So the request for today's medication, not medication, I'm not dishing out medication today. Today's meditation is really around the theme of letting go, and letting go of personal will, letting go of beliefs that maybe are not accurate, letting go of illusion. There are so many things we could think of that might be very wise to let go of, but at any rate. So the thing that we're not interested in letting go of, at least not in this moment of our lives, is just the naturalness of breathing. So if we let go of trying to control our breath, that's one place to start. We don't need to make it longer or shorter or deeper or shallower. But you can just, in this moment, be aware that the breath is happening on its own. And maybe so many other things are just happening on their own as well. But we have judgments. The mind has lots of judgments about how things should look, how the character called me should look or act or think or so forth. So just as the breath rises and falls, so does the mind of thought. The mind of thought, it moves through like the wind, kind of continually moving, sometimes still, sometimes rapidly firing off thought after thought, judgment after judgment. So we're not here to try to get rid of thought. That would be pretty much impossible over the long haul. Or to even judge that thought should not be here. It's what the relationship is to thought that creates more or less suffering, more or less freedom. So just in this moment, I would invite you to just think of one really strongly believed belief. It could be negative, it could be positive. And we're not trying to make it be one thing or another. Just what comes up for you when you invite yourself to look into the matter of just even a single very strong belief. So something is aware of that belief, or you wouldn't have thought about it. You wouldn't have known that there was a thought about it. And so ask yourself, just in this moment, does what is awake and aware in you hold a belief for or against anything? So if we're interested in letting go, we need to have a clearer understanding of what it is that's letting go. And what it is that's holding on. And it's not our awareness. Awareness is simply shedding light on beliefs, on judgments, on identities. But all of us are conditioned. Our minds are conditioned. Our bodies are conditioned. So it makes sense, if we're interested in letting go, to see what is holding on. And we could be holding on to pain. We could be holding on to spiritual beliefs. We could be holding on to political beliefs. And some of those things, if you're honest, you don't want to get rid of. And we're not even talking about getting rid of anything when we talk about letting go. We're talking about seeing clearly what is holding on, and sometimes for what purpose. If you can even imagine a moment or two where you have no judgment whatsoever about life as it is, or your being as it is, if there's no judgment for or against, who are you? Do you know who you are? If you don't know what you're against or what you're for. I'm not speaking here about letting go of your values, what seems important to you, what seems to be aligned with your own experience of truth, however you want to define it. I'm talking about really seeing clearly what's holding on. Because even if a belief or a judgment arises, if there's nothing holding on to it, it just has its moment in the sun, so to speak, dances its little pirouette and then moves on. But there's something that grabs hold. So what do you tend to grab hold of in your own experience? Much of it is unconscious, so you have to be open to allowing yourself to know the kinds of things or the people or the beliefs, the judgments that seem to attract your attention. I mean, there are what we would call political junkies who are constantly attached to the news for or against, fill in the blank. There are spiritual junkies who are continually looking for the next idea, the next exercise, the next type of meditation, the next teacher, the next retreat, whatever, the next experience. And it can be just as addictive as anything else, really. But at some point, there may come a moment where you feel your own attention being invited backwards into what's here, no matter what arises. And then from that perspective, when it's operating more and more consciously, we see more clearly to what we are attached and what we have adverse reactions to, what we push away, what we hold on to. Now, if you can avoid judging that, oh, I'm not supposed to, the mind might say. No, we're not saying that. We're talking about the energetics of attention and grasping and refusing. Those are all things we have lots of experience with. One specific request was to look into letting go of spiritual beliefs. So I'm going to spend a moment or two inviting you to see what they are. What are a few of your own so-called spiritual beliefs. You might discover that there's some place in your mind when you're listening to a dharma talk, or you're at a retreat and you hear a teacher speak about something, or you see something on YouTube. At any rate, you might discover that there's something in your mind that says, oh, I already know this. Yes, that's true. And it's not about not resonating with what seems true or feels true deep in your being. It's about passing it over with the I know that. The same way we might look at a flower and say, oh, I know that's a chrysanthemum, and then we pass over it. There's not a real seeing of something from the deep place of seeing and knowing. There's an idea. Ah, it's an oak tree. Oh, this is what meditation is supposed to look like or feel like. Many, many, many spiritual seekers have many, many, many ideas about how the person, so-called, is supposed to act if they're interested in spirituality. How you are supposed to think or feel or operate in the world if. And probably all of us have had moments of those kinds of thoughts. Oh, if I were really deeply and truly awake, I would, or I would not, fill in the blank. And can we see those as ideas and not truth? Because it appears that the truth about life moving is that it just is moving as it does. The moment is as it is. It doesn't mean, if we accept the moment as it is, that it necessarily will stay that way for the next moment or the next week or month or year. No, we're just here present to the moment as it is. And sometimes that moment as it is will be seeing an attachment to a belief we have. And sometimes clutch is very, very strong. You can imagine your hand making a fist. It's like holding on really tightly to some belief, spiritual or otherwise. Can you possibly, from time to time, just see a belief as a belief? We not necessarily having to make it more or less true from your mind's perspective, but just that it's a belief and there's something that's really holding on to a particular belief. I mean, we see this in fundamentalist religions all the time. There's a belief, and we're asked to believe, to have faith in the belief. And sometimes that can be helpful, useful for people along the way. But if you're interested in the deeper truth, it's not about beliefs. It's about discovering in your own experience what is so, what is true. Not so your mind can parrot out something that you've heard. Not that your mind can even define what you find. In spirituality, there's a lot of not knowing and being willing not to know and being present for the moment as it is, because that's the only time or place, so to speak, that awakeness is here, in the moment. And it will see, feel, experience whatever is being held on to or let go of. So there's no separate one to let go of anything. But the thing that most, we could say, detracts from more and more spiritual freedom is holding on to the idea of a separate self. We have all been conditioned to consider the body, mind, the extent of who we are. But is that so? When even for a single moment you may experience not being separate from whatever is here, be it a flower, a feeling, a piece of music, or silence itself. In that moment where there's no separation, and it may only be a moment before the mind comes in and says, oh, I experienced that. I, separate somebody, experienced something. But in the moment where you're not separate from either your true nature or the moment, the separate self is not there. Attention is not on the idea of a separate self. It's simply engaged, at one with, not separate from the moment as it is. So that's an enlightened moment. And then the mind says, well, I should be having those moments all the time. If I were really awake, then that's how I would see the world every moment of the day. Oh, really? Might that not be another belief? Because life is constantly flowing, isn't it? It's constantly moving. It's not static. Our feelings are not static. The cells in our bodies are not static. Thoughts, feelings, weather, temperature, food, how much water we drink in a day, etc., etc. Everything is moving, is flowing. But it's flowing in and as something that may be very quiet, very still, very awake, and mysterious to the mind. What is it like not to know what that is in some intellectual way, but to simply let go into the felt sense, into the experience of the moment instead of the idea of the moment? Even when that moment is a very, we might say, a very identified moment, identified with somebody that we imagine in that moment is a separate somebody, even if that's the moment, can we be free enough to let that moment be what it is, but to begin to see it more and more clearly, not for judgment, not even to try to be rid of it, but to see clearly, because the clear seeing allows lots of things to be let go of. Not because we should, but simply because they're seen. We see through illusion. We see through the many, many ideas and judgments we have that we take to be truth. It doesn't mean they don't arise, but something sees clearly that these are beliefs, thoughts, judgments, conditioning, and so forth. So let's just sit for another 10 minutes in the quiet and just invite you to explore this whole possibility of seeing more clearly. What are the things or the people or the ideas or the beliefs that you find yourself holding on to? Maybe sometimes for dear life, because who would you be without them? Or maybe just feeling into this moment as it is, without needing to figure anything out, being willing not to know, but being at one with whatever is arising in the moment. So you'll just see how the silence wants to play, so to speak. And you'll hear the bell in about 10 minutes. So in the next few moments, while we're still sitting in the quiet, I would invite you to see what might want to arise from your own wisdom, your own inner knowing, when you unhook it from your beliefs, your desires, your wishes, your so-called personal will. When we just operate more and more from a place of not needing to know, there's a deeper knowing that is free to arise, that isn't being attached to thoughts and judgments and beliefs. If even for a moment we let go of the way I want it to be, and we're simply here, open, present, not directing the show from the mind or trying to. There is an inner guidance. There is an inner teacher. There is the movement of love and wisdom that arise more and more spontaneously when we aren't attached to our judgments, beliefs, including the I thought, the thought of who I am, rather than feeling into the depths of who that I am might actually be. There's a very practical advantage to letting go more and more into don't know mind, which allows that deeper knowing to surface more freely, more spontaneously. So just in the next few moments of quiet, see if anything wants to arise from that deeper place in you. Is there some wisdom, some direction, some way the current of your life seems to want to move from that deeper dimension of yourself? Maybe nothing will arise, which is fine. But just stay open.